my name is Beck and welcome to my quarterly TBR. So these are the books that I want to read from October to December this year. This is a TBR with a few of my priority books on it, maybe a few audiobooks, and then a lot of new releases on it. But if you've noticed, if you've been following my channel, I haven't really done a lot of book hauls recently, and that's because I haven't been able to really afford books. So even though I do want to read all of the books that I list here, I might not get to all of them because financially I can't afford them yet, but I will be reading them at some point, whether it's at the end of this year or at the start of next year. So I do plan on reading all of these books, but let's just get into it and discuss what I have left over from my priority list. So first of all, I have Nightblood by Ellie Blake. I started this and I got just under halfway through it, and I like this book, but I just got distracted by a readathon, I think, and that's why I have put it down and not picked it up again since. I think I put this down in like April or May, so near the mid to start of the year, unfortunately, and I've just let it fall by the wayside, so that's not on, and I need to finish it before this year finishes. But if you didn't know what this series is, it's a young adult fantasy. The first book in this series is called Frostblood, and it's kind of a riff off what Avatar The Last Airbender was, so I know that the author really liked the Katara and Zuko relationship in Avatar The Last Airbender, and obviously the elemental magic part of it too, so she's incorporated that into this trilogy that she's written, and the main character is named Ruby, and she's actually a Fireblood, and Firebloods are kind of basically banned and outlawed, and if you're a Fireblood you tend to get prosecuted and hanged or murdered. So she's had to hide this gift, and in the beginning of Frostblood, which is the first book, she gets found by someone and trained up in her gift, and it all has to be kept very secret, otherwise the ramifications of her getting found out are quite dire. I don't really want to spoil too much about what happens since, and I can't remember the intricacies of the plot anyway because I read it so long ago, but I do like the banter in this series. It's really easy and fun to read, and it does have really cool action in it too. And one of the main things that I really liked about this series, or that I really like about it, is that the magic isn't really easy to learn. Like in Avatar The Last Airbender, one of my favourite cartoons ever, they really have to earn their magic and earn their abilities. They don't just click their fingers and are suddenly able to manipulate fire. It's something that she really struggles with, and I like that about this series, so I'm looking forward to reading the third book and finishing the trilogy at last. The next book on this quarterly TBR is, surprise surprise, another fantasy book, and it's Truth Witch by Susan Dennard. This is a really popular young adult series. I see it a lot on Twitter and BookTube as well, and a little bit on Bookstagram, but I don't know too much about it other than the fact that there's a truth witch in here that can detect lies, and there's a sight witch, I think, who can kind of predict people's futures or their trajectories of what will happen to them in their futures and how they can change that. And I also know that it follows two characters who are best friends rather than two characters who are like enemies to lovers and have to be put on this quest together, and then they end up forming a bond because of all the dire things that they experience. So I know that this follows two friends, which is why I'm interested in it, even though if there's romance, there probably will be because it's young adult, and that seems to be a thing with the plots of young adult. But I think I'll like it in this context anyway because the foundation of the story is about friends. So I have put this off and put this off and put this off all year, and that's a little bit disgraceful. I have the first book and the second book, Wind Witch, so I need to just dive in, bite the bullet, and read this series. Like I've been doing recently in my reading vlogs, I did a few try chapters, and that's like a try chapter tag. You read the first chapter of a book and you talk to the camera about what you think about it and whether you'll like it and what rating you'll give it. So I think I just need to do that with this book as well to convince myself that I'm going to enjoy it, because if I don't know anything about it, it's really easy to put off. So I need to stop doing that, and I need to actually pick it up and read it. And something that's rare in Australia is getting the hardcover. And this is a hardcover, so it's nice and big and pretty, and I want to enjoy it, so I need to get onto it. The next book is actually by the same author who wrote Circe, and I don't have the book with me, unfortunately, but it is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and The Song of Achilles is a retelling of a Greek myth, and I think it follows a character named Patroclus, and obviously Achilles as well. I think it potentially investigates a romance between both of them, but that's all I genuinely know about it. I also didn't know a lot about Circe going into it either, and I think because it's an adult series or it's an adult book, it can delve into the grittiness and the detail of it and has space to do that, whereas a YA book sets things up very quickly and there has to be action almost from the get-go. So I think I'm going to like The Song of Achilles when I get to it. I'm probably going to listen to it on audiobook because that's how I consumed Circe, and I've heard recommended by friends to read Circe first, which I did, and then read The Song of Achilles because they've said that The Song of Achilles is better. So I'm going to trust my friends and hope that The Song of Achilles is better, because I liked Circe, but I think I gave it like a 3 or 3.5 stars. So if I can give The Song of Achilles a 4 stars, that would be great. Next, we're on to new releases, and the next book in a adult fantasy series that I started this year is coming out in October at the end of the month. I think it's the last installment in the series, which makes me nervous because so much has happened so far and I'm really concerned about who might die in the end of this book series, but it is the last book in the Black Prism series and it's called The Burning White. And the reason I love this fantasy series, I adored the first book, but I gave the rest of the series like about a 4 to 4.5 stars each, and I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. So it has dipped a little bit, but I'm still interested in it regardless. So the reason I really like this series is, one, the main character, Kip, is very self-deprecating with his humour, and even though he's a little bit annoying in the first book, or so I've heard, I actually didn't mind him, he gets a lot of growth happen across the series, as you'd expect, because he's like 16 in this book and he learns a lot as he progresses through the rest of the series. So I like him for his sarcasm and his humour and the kind of internal monologues that he has, but also it's a multiple perspective fantasy, and the magic system in this book series is so well developed. It deals with colour and it's really hard to describe, but I'm going to probably butcher it in my basic description of it. But characters can see and manipulate colour, and not all of them can manipulate every colour on the spectrum, but those who can are called the Prism, and he's kind of a political figure. So he's one of the characters in this series. He's very overpowered, but he's going through some really internal struggles as well. So it's interesting to see someone who has all of this power struggle so much on the inside when you think he's fine as well. So it's interesting to see Kip struggling outwardly and this Prism character struggling inwardly, and the fallout of what happens with both. It also deals with a war between these particular peoples too. So that is a very mishmash, messed up description of what is going on over these books, but I can't talk about what is going on currently because it will spoil everything that's happened in the first book. But just know that I like this series. I'm enjoying listening to the audiobook. It's sarcastic, it makes me laugh, but it's also dark and intricate, and the magic system builds and builds and builds with each book. And there's also a magical school that they go to learn the magic system. So if that's something that sounds like it's up your alley, definitely pick up this series because it's a lot of fun. The next book that I'm anticipating also comes out in October, I believe, and it is the next book in Sebastian de Castell's Spellslinger series. So this is the 5th book, and the 6th book, Crownbreaker, is coming out this year. And I'm so psyched but so sad to see this series end because it's one of my absolute favourite young adult fantasy series. Kellen is one of my favourite characters ever. You see him so broken and so grieving, and he just grows so much with each book, and it's got such an element of chosen family in this too, which I love. It just hits all of the right boxes when it comes to the tropes that I enjoy, and it's very sarcastic as well, and I tend to like books with a little bit of humour and a little bit of sarcasm and some darkness and some grit to them, and this is the perfect series for that, and it only grows with each book. And it's got like a little bit of a cult-like aspect to it as well, with the people that Kellen knows, and I won't describe too much as to why that is because potential spoilers, but if you haven't read this series, please get on it because I didn't expect to enjoy it so much, and I just picked up the first book on a whim and it ended up becoming one of my absolute favourites, and I've bought each book as it released. So definitely one of my favourite authors and definitely one of my favourite series, and it's going to be a bittersweet end, but I hope Kellen gets the ending that he definitely deserves. Now, the next book that I'm anticipating is by a very hyped author, and it is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, and this is a supernatural fantasy mystery book, I think, and it's an adult book, so it's not a young adult book like she's written in the past. It's an adult book with a character in their 20s, I think. I'm not sure exactly how old, but I know it comes out in October, maybe around the 24th, and this is one of the books I'm anticipating because I really like Leigh Bardugo's writing. I loved Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. I haven't read her Shadow and Bone series. I'm looking forward to her writing outside of that established fantasy world because I think Ninth House is going to really delve into some darker, grittier themes, and I like that she's started to explore those a little bit in her Six of Crows series, but obviously wanted to go darker, and so she's written something more adult. And I just love seeing characters in books that are in their 20s rather than 15 or 16 years old because that's a lot more in my wheelhouse and I feel like I can relate a lot more. So that's why I'm looking forward to Ninth House, so hopefully I can afford it when it eventually comes out in October. Next up, I've also got Tunnel of Bones by V.E. Schwab, and this is the second book in her City of Ghosts series. So this series follows Cassidy Blake, and when Cassidy was little, about 8 or 10 years old, she had an accident, so she went off an icy bridge and she passed through the veil of death and a ghost has brought her back through the veil. So she can now see ghosts and her best friend is a ghost. So it's just about her and her family going to different places across the globe because her parents run a ghost show where they investigate things. And so it's fun to see her parents go to film this show, and in the background she is actually legitimately seeing all of these ghosts and having to deal with her own trials and meeting all these new people and figuring out how to stay alive. So it is middle grade, it's written for a bit of a younger audience, but regardless, I really like the tone of it. I love the pace of it. I really like the way that the friendship is built between Cassidy and her best friend. I can't remember his name off the top of my head because I read the first book like a year ago, but The Tunnel of Bones has come out very recently. I think it was in August, maybe the beginning of September, so I'm already behind, but I want to pick that up very, very soon. Because they're written for people who are obviously a lot younger than me, they're really easy for me to devour and finish really quickly, so I'm looking forward to picking up Tunnel of Bones, A, for that reason, but also B, because I like Victoria Schwab's writing, and I think she's done really well with her first book in this series. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, so that's why I'm looking forward to reading Tunnel of Bones. City of Ghosts, I believe, was set in Edinburgh in Scotland, and then the second book, Tunnel of Bones, is set in Paris, so I'm looking forward to seeing where the next one after that is set. So we're almost done. We've only got 3 more books on this list. So the next one is Tyrant's Tomb by Rick Riordan, and this is the 4th book, I believe, in the Trials of Apollo series, and I really liked that series. I went from liking it to absolutely loving it, and it's because the most recent book did something that I didn't expect, and it stuck to its guns, and instead of giving us kind of an easy way out and a more lighthearted tone to the first 2 books, it went somewhere a little bit deeper, and that's why I've really kind of fallen head over heels in being invested in this series. Before I could just pick up, put it down and enjoy it, but because of the thing that happened in the 3rd book, I was like, ooh, that's going to have some ramifications, so I'm looking forward to picking up the 4th one, and I'm being very careful not to spoil it. I hate seeing spoilers in videos, so I'm trying my best to avoid them. If you haven't picked up The Trials of Apollo, it's about the god Apollo, and he is the god of art and music, and he offended Zeus, and so he's been kicked out of Olympus, basically, and he has to figure out how to be a 15 or 16-year-old, and he goes to Camp Half-Blood, and he runs into a bunch of different characters from the different series that we already know and love and that we've met before, and so it's about his adventures of trying to restore the lost oracles, and there's 4 of them, I think, because not only is he the god of art and music, he's also the god of prophecy, so it falls to him as a 15-year-old to go on these quests and save people and figure out prophecies. So the 4th book in that series is coming out. I don't know if it's the last book in that series. Maybe there's 5 books. Don't quote me because I don't know, but regardless, I'm looking forward to the next installment. The next one I'm looking forward to is actually already out, and it's To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I absolutely adore her Wayfarers series. It is a beautiful adult sci-fi series. It's very human, it's just very emotive, and I read it at the perfect time, so that probably plays into it a little bit as well. If you don't know what the first book is, it is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. You'll probably recognize the cover because she wrote so well and had such a depth and a breadth to her books. I'm looking forward to picking up her novella and seeing if it does the same thing. And I don't actually know what the novella is about. I just believe it's a sci-fi book, and I know it has the orange cover, and that's the cover that I want. And I think that doesn't come out in paperback until sometime next year. So I potentially have a little bit of time before I get to this one, but if I want to read it as soon as possible, I might pick up the audiobook. But I wanted to include it on this list because I'm aware of it and I don't want to forget about it, and I don't want it to drift off my radar. So Becky Chambers is probably going to go into my favourite authors list just because I love her books so much. So To Be Taught If Fortunate is definitely one that I want to read. And then we're coming into the last book that I am anticipating for the end of this year, and it is Supernova, and that is by Marissa Meyer. This is the 3rd book and the final book in her Renegade series, and this is like a dystopian-esque story where it follows a supervillain who called on the heroes in this world to come and help her, but they didn't come and her family ended up getting murdered. So she's got a vendetta against these superheroes. She's kind of infiltrated their ranks, pretending to be someone else. We're kind of at the fallout of which side will she choose. And I read the 2nd book at the beginning of last year, I think, and I thought it was just a bit of an extension of the 1st book. So I didn't see too much happen in the 2nd book that couldn't have been executed in the 1st one. So I'm looking forward to the 3rd book because it's going to be something different, or at least I hope it is. Because the 1st and 2nd book are fairly similar and they just built up character a little bit but then broke things back down to where it kind of began without giving anything away. That's how I felt about it. I am anticipating the 3rd book because hopefully it does something different, and hopefully the characters will change significantly from the first 2 books, because I don't want the next book to be something more of the same. And I think with the last book in a series, that's harder to do. But I'm looking forward to Supernova, and I don't know when that comes out. Maybe it's November. And then that's it for anticipated releases. I think I still have The Waking Fire by Anthony Ryan on my TBR, and then I've also got Iona on my TBR as well, and those are 2 of the books that I wanted to read this year, and I've read the first couple of pages of both and I really enjoyed them. I talked about them in a reading vlog. I just didn't have time to get through and read both of them, so that's why they're going on to this TBR now. I hope I get to them at the end of this year, but I don't have high hopes that I will. But I wanted to mention them anyway, just so you know I haven't forgotten about them completely. One more book. There is a Best Served Cold by Joe Abercrombie, and that is the next installment in his Blade Itself series, the First Law series. The First Law series is a trilogy, but it continues in standalones after that trilogy, and they are an adult fantasy series. I don't want to say too much because obviously it's a continuation of what's happened in the trilogy, so I don't want to spoil you on that. But it is a multiple perspective. It's kind of like a morally grey fantasy that has fairly questionable characters, but you can still get behind them because you understand all the decisions they're making and why. And because of that characterization, I really got invested, surprisingly, in the politics of it. So I'm looking forward to jumping into hopefully the audiobook of Best Served Cold, which I believe is the next book in the series, and kind of seeing where the characters that I grew to love ended up. That's on my radar as well. Because it's an audiobook and I don't have it physically, I don't know how I'm going to go with actually getting to it, but hopefully in the 3 months I have for the end of the year, I will have time to at least start it or sample it at least. So there you go, that is my quarterly TBR for the last 3 months of the year. Keep your fingers crossed that I can get through a few of these, so look out for some reading vlogs on my channel. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you are reading any of these books, or you have any of these books, or you've read any of these books, please let me know in the comments. I would love to chat to you. But thank you again so much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.